My name is Alex Chen and I'm 28 years old. I've worked at Morrison Tech for 5 years, climbing from entry-level coordinator to senior project manager. I'm the type of person who shows up early, stays late, and genuinely cares about doing good work. My colleagues respect me, clients love working with me, and my manager, well, that's where this story gets interesting. I thought I knew them. I was wrong. Everything I'm about to tell you actually happened, and it changed my life forever. I sat outside the conference room, hands folded on my lap, legs bouncing nervously. This was it, my promotion meeting. I'd been groomed for this all year. My manager, Derek Hamilton, had told me 3 weeks ago that I was the obvious choice for senior manager. HR had nodded along during our one-on-one meetings. Everything pointed to yes. I'd already mentally moved into the bigger office on the 4th floor. I'd researched what to wear to my first team meeting as their boss. I'd even drafted a thank you email to Derek in my head. This was the culmination of 5 years of sacrifice, late nights, and proving myself again and again. Today, everything was supposed to change. The conference room door opened. Derek walked out, followed by Sharon from HR. Derek looked serious, too serious. Something in my stomach twisted. This wasn't the look of someone about to congratulate you. This was the look of someone carrying bad news. I stood up, trying to keep my expression neutral, but my heart was already pounding. "Alex, come in," Sharon said, gesturing to a chair already positioned at the opposite end of the table from where they were sitting. My first instinct was right. Something was very wrong. I watched Derek slide a thick file across the table toward me. Inside that folder was my entire career, he said, all laid out. Except it wasn't. It was a fiction. A carefully constructed lie designed to destroy me. Derek began reading from papers he held, his voice steady and professional. He talked about repeated performance concerns, missed deadlines, and interpersonal conflicts with team members. Every accusation was false. Every example was either exaggerated beyond recognition or completely fabricated. I opened the file to find emails I'd never written, project reports with my name altered, metrics I'd never submitted. My hands trembled, not from fear but from pure raw rage. Sharon looked uncomfortable. Derek wouldn't make eye contact. He just kept reading, his voice never wavering, as if he were reciting a grocery list instead of destroying my life. "Due to these concerns," he continued, "we've made the decision to offer the senior manager position to Jordan Peterson instead. Jordan has demonstrated more consistent leadership qualities. Jordan, the same Jordan who joined the company 8 months ago. The same Jordan who spent half his time in the break room and the other half taking credit for other people's work." I felt the room spin, not from the rejection, but from the bold audacity of it. This wasn't just denying me a promotion. This was an execution. This was Derek rewriting history to make sure I looked guilty of crimes I'd never committed. Back at my desk 30 minutes later, I couldn't focus. My hands shook as I typed. Around me, coworkers avoided eye contact. News travels fast in an office. Word had already spread that I'd been let go from the promotion, that there were serious concerns about my performance. Nobody knew it was all lies. They just knew that Derek had said it, so it had to be true. 3 new warning emails appeared in my inbox that afternoon, all supposedly sent from Derek that morning, all documenting poor performance. Except I'd never seen them before. I'd never heard about these incidents. I checked the timestamps. They were all sent at 11:47 p.m. after I'd left for the day. That's when something inside me shifted. The shock faded. The anger crystallized into something cold and focused. I pulled out my phone and texted my IT friend Marcus. "Quick question. Can someone access your email account without you knowing?" His response came back in seconds. "Yeah, but it would show in the login logs." "Why?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I opened my email settings and navigated to the account activity section. There it was. A login from Derek's workstation at 11:43 p.m. the previous night. He'd literally accessed my email account and sent those fake warnings himself. The proof was sitting right there on my screen, time-stamped and irrefutable. I took a deep breath. I'd been sabotaged, and now I had evidence. Over the next 2 weeks, I documented everything. Screenshots, timestamps, login records. I printed the fake emails and organized them chronologically. I created a file folder on my personal cloud storage called The Fall, and I filled it with evidence. But that's when things got worse, much worse. Small tasks started disappearing from our shared drives. Metrics I'd submitted for client reports were suddenly altered. Numbers changed, dates shifted, explanations became distorted. Derek scheduled surprise one-on-one meetings where he'd push the narrative that I was slipping, that my work was deteriorating, that I was becoming a liability to the team. Each meeting felt like another knife, and each meeting I brought my phone. I recorded every word. The recordings were crystal clear. Derek's voice calm and manipulative, suggesting that I take personal time to refocus my energy. His implication was obvious: quit before you're fired. But I wasn't going anywhere, not yet. I watched him work, I studied his patterns, and I realized something terrifying. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't one bad day or a personal grudge that had spiraled. This was calculated. This was practiced, and it had worked before. I started asking around quietly, carefully. I didn't want to tip Derek off, but I needed to know if I was the first or if this was a pattern. My coworker Thomas pulled me aside during lunch. "You're not the first person they've done this to," he said quietly. We sat in the back corner of the cafeteria and he told me the story of Rebecca, who'd worked here 3 years ago. Rebecca had been on track for a promotion. Then suddenly she wasn't. Her performance was questioned. Her competence was doubted. Within a week she was gone. She left the industry entirely after that, too broken by the experience to continue. "Did anyone investigate?" I asked. Thomas shook his head. "HR believed Derek. They always do. He's been here forever. He's friends with the director of operations. Nobody dares question him." Before leaving, Thomas did something risky. He handed me a USB drive. "You should see this," he whispered. I didn't ask what was on it. I already knew I had to look. That night, I plugged the drive into my laptop. What I found made my blood run cold. The USB contained old meeting recordings. Dozens of them. In one clip, Derek was insulting a junior employee for lacking ambition. In another, he was boasting to someone in HR about how he could train them to trust his judgment. In a third, he was laughing about how easy it was to manipulate metrics if you knew which numbers to change. These weren't recent recordings. Some were from 3 years ago, and they painted a picture of systematic manipulation. Derek hadn't just sabotaged one person. He'd sabotaged at least 5 people that I could count from the files. 5 careers. 5 people driven out or demoted or trapped in positions they'd outgrown. I organized the recordings into folders, creating a timeline of misconduct that spanned years. This wasn't just my promotion being stolen. This was a pattern of abuse, a culture of manipulation that HR seemed either unwilling or unable to stop. But as I sorted through the files, I noticed something odd. There were gaps in the timeline, entire weeks missing, months where no recordings existed. These weren't random gaps either. They corresponded with the same periods when I'd noticed financial discrepancies in our department's budget reports. I felt like I was looking at a puzzle with missing pieces, and I was starting to see the bigger picture. I dug into the financial records that were publicly available to managers like me. The deeper I looked, the worse it got. There were duplicate invoices to major clients, overbilled hours that didn't match actual project timelines, unauthorized approvals that Derek had somehow squeezed through. In one case, a client had been charged $42,000 for work that never happened. This wasn't just about ruining careers anymore. This was about fraud. This was about money that had been stolen and covered up. And I was starting to understand why Derek had been so desperate to get rid of me. My promotion would have given me access to financial audits I didn't currently have. My new role would have required me to sign off on major expenses. Derek couldn't control me the way he controlled junior employees. He hadn't sabotaged my promotion because he was insecure or petty. He'd done it because I was a threat to his entire criminal operation. I saved copies of everything to the cloud. Then I saved copies again. I backed it up on 3 different devices. This information was too important to lose. The parking lot was empty except for 2 cars. I saw a figure leaning against a blue sedan. It was Sarah, a woman who'd worked at Morrison Tech 2 years ago before she'd mysteriously quit. She'd sent me an anonymous email that morning. "If you're digging into the numbers, we should talk. Meet me outside at 5 p.m. I was one of Derek's victims, Sarah said as I approached. I didn't even know it at first. I just thought I was bad at my job. Then I started noticing things, missing hours, changed reports. When I asked questions, I was suddenly not a cultural fit. She handed me an envelope. Inside were copies of buried audit reports that had been filed and then marked as incomplete or pending review. These reports contained the exact discrepancies I'd been finding. Someone, probably in the accounting department, had noticed the problems 3 years ago, but the investigations had been quietly shelved. "The system protects people like Derek," Sarah told me. "Unless you can prove everything and present it all at once, they'll just deny, delay, and destroy evidence. You need a plan that doesn't give them time to cover their tracks." I knew she was right. I couldn't just march into HR with my evidence. Derek would see me coming. He'd use his connections to bury the investigation before it even started. I needed something bigger. I needed leverage. I went home and spread everything across my dining table. Recordings, screenshots, emails, invoice discrepancies, financial reports. It was a map of corruption, and I was holding the entire blueprint in my hands. But revenge, I realized, wasn't what I needed. justice was, and justice required strategy. It required a plan so sophisticated that Derek wouldn't see it coming until it was too late to run. I poured myself a coffee and sat down. For 3 hours I thought. I considered every angle. I imagined every response Derek might make. And then, as the sun was setting, my phone buzzed. It was a recruiter from a company called Pinnacle Digital. They worked in the same industry as Morrison Tech, but they were smaller, hungrier, and aggressively expanding. They wanted to meet with me about a senior position. The timing was almost too perfect. "How did you get my number?" I asked. "Your work is well known," the recruiter replied. "What you did on the Martinez project was brilliant. We want someone like you on our team." I'd never heard of Pinnacle Digital, but I was about to be very interested in learning about them. The interview at Pinnacle Digital's offices was different from anything I'd expected. The team was young, hungry, and genuinely impressed by my work. They weren't interested in the lies Derek had told. They'd done their own research. They'd talked to my actual clients. They knew exactly who I was and what I could do. "We're expanding aggressively," the hiring manager, Lisa, told me. "We're targeting a few key clients in this market who we think are being underserved. We believe in building from the inside, hiring people who understand the landscape, people who know where the problems are." She was being careful with her words, but the message was clear. They wanted to pull clients away from Morrison Tech, and they wanted someone on the inside to help them understand how. "What would you be willing to do?" Lisa asked quietly, "if you had the opportunity to start over somewhere that actually valued you?" I thought about that question for a long time before I answered. "Anything legal," I said finally. "I want to win the right way." She smiled. "That's exactly what we hoped you'd say." They offered me the job on the spot. Senior manager, 40% raise, the chance to build my own department. I asked for 2 weeks before I gave them my answer. I accepted the offer from Pinnacle Digital, but I didn't resign from Morrison Tech. Not yet. Instead, I entered what I thought of as my ghost phase. For the next 4 weeks, I continued showing up at Morrison Tech, but my mind was already 3 moves ahead. I gathered every loose thread. I documented every email. I recorded every conversation with Derek. I collected performance reviews that contradicted the complaints in my file. I interviewed discreet employees who'd noticed the pattern of sabotage. I created a catalogue of HR's failures to investigate previous complaints. And I waited. I was patient. Derek started to relax, thinking I'd given up. He stopped recording his meetings as carefully. He became less paranoid about his email. He actually believed he'd won. That's when Pinnacle Digital called me back. "We're making a move on one of your company's biggest clients," Lisa told me. "The Hartwell Financial Group. They're unhappy with their current provider. We're preparing a proposal. We need someone who knows exactly what they need and what Morrison Tech has failed to deliver." I knew Hartwell Financial. I'd been managing that account for the last 2 years. I knew their frustrations inside and out. I knew Derek had been overbilling them for months, and I knew exactly how to save them. "Give me 4 weeks, I told Lisa. "I need to handle something first, then I'm all yours." I started making small mistakes, intentional ones that Derek would find. I left data slightly misorganized. I submitted reports with minor inconsistencies. Not enough to be serious, but enough to give Derek more ammunition. I was setting the stage. Then I began sharing small, harmless information with team members. Information I knew would eventually reach Derek and send him into a panic. Budget concerns that were actually non-issues. Timeline changes that didn't actually matter. Rumors about potential audits that weren't real. Derek panicked exactly as I'd predicted. He called emergency meetings. He reordered priorities. He rewrote policies. He snapped at staff, and in his panic he made mistakes. Real mistakes. He altered more documents. He sent more suspicious emails. He dug himself deeper into the hole I was carefully laying out beneath him. I documented every desperate move. Each one was evidence. Each one was another nail in his coffin. When HR finally scheduled what they called a performance review escalation, I was ready. I walked into the meeting calm and collected, while Derek looked nervous and angry. Instead of defending myself, I slid a sealed envelope across the desk. "I'd like to present some information that I think you should see," I said quietly. Inside that envelope was the first layer of evidence. Not everything, just enough to spark serious questions. Recordings of Derek admitting to manipulating metrics. Screenshots of login records showing unauthorized access to my email. The buried audit reports from 3 years ago. HR's faces changed instantly. Shock, concern, dawning realization that something very wrong had been happening right under their noses. Derek started to speak, but Sharon cut him off. "We need to pause this meeting," This requires investigation. As I walked out, I saw Derek's hands shaking. The panic in his eyes was unmistakable. He finally understood that I wasn't going to quit. I wasn't going to disappear quietly. I was going to fight. And he had no idea how hard. Within days, the board ordered a full internal audit. The office atmosphere shifted instantly. Where Derek had once been untouchable, he was now radioactive. People who'd laughed at his jokes suddenly avoided him. HR representatives showed up without warning to interview staff members about their experiences. I knew what was happening behind closed doors because my IT friend Marcus gave me updates. The audit team had found significant irregularities. They'd discovered the overbilling. They'd traced the altered documents. They were building their own case against Derek, one that was even more comprehensive than mine. Derek became increasingly desperate. He sent urgent emails to higher management, trying to spin his behavior as aggressive sales tactics. He reorganized teams to hide the worst of the financial problems. He attempted to manipulate the audit trail by deleting files, a move that only made him look more guilty when the IT team recovered them. Meanwhile, Lisa from Pinnacle Digital called with an update. "We're ready to make our move on Hartwell Financial. Can you be our point of contact for their transition?" I told her yes. I told her I was ready for everything to move forward, and that's when the final pieces of my plan clicked into place. I pulled the Hartwell Financial file from our system and reviewed it one final time. Every project, every interaction, every mistake Morrison Tech had made, and I had a clean version ready, one that showed exactly what Pinnacle Digital would do differently, one that was specifically designed for me to present. I prepared a comprehensive transition plan, not to help Morrison Tech, but to help Hartwell Financial escape them. I documented every instance where Derek's mismanagement had cost them money or time. I highlighted every overcharge. I created a proposal so compelling that no client in their right mind would choose Morrison Tech over Pinnacle Digital. And I made sure that when the time came, my name would be on that proposal. My signature would close that deal. That single contract would be the competitive advantage that Pinnacle Digital needed to establish themselves as a serious player in this market. For Morrison Tech, it would be catastrophic. Hartwell Financial was their largest account. Losing them wouldn't just hurt the company's bottom line. It would signal to other clients that Morrison Tech wasn't stable, wasn't trustworthy, wasn't worth their money. Everything was connected now. The sabotage, the evidence, the promotion, the new job, the client transition. It was all one move, one perfectly orchestrated, methodically executed plan. 3 days before my planned resignation, Derek cornered me in the break room. His face was flushed. His eyes were wild. He looked like a man watching his world collapse in real time. "I know what you're doing," he hissed, keeping his voice low so no one could hear. "You're going to go down with me. They'll see that you fabricated evidence. They'll see that you're just a disgruntled employee with an axe to grind." I looked at him calmly. "Derek, I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm just being honest about what's happened. The recordings, the financial discrepancies, the manipulated documents, I didn't create any of that. You did. I'm just showing people what you've already done." His face darkened with rage. He leaned closer, his voice becoming threatening. "You have no idea what kind of enemies you're making. I have friends in this industry. One word from me, and your career will be over before it starts. You'll never work in this field again." I smiled, and I saw the fear flicker across his face when I did. "You shouldn't threaten people when the walls have microphones," I said quietly, tapping my pocket where my phone was recording every word. He went pale, then he turned and walked away, his shoulders sagging like someone had just pulled all the strings holding him up. The calendar invite appeared in my inbox that afternoon. Mandatory all-hands meeting at 2 p.m. tomorrow. Derek would be presenting quarterly results and discussing the company's direction moving forward. It was his big moment to regain control of the narrative, to prove that rumors about him were just that, rumors. He had no idea it was his last performance. I arrived at the meeting 5 minutes early. I sat in the back. I watched him enter with his head held high, carrying presentation slides and looking almost like his old self, confident, in control, untouchable. The projector lit up. Derek smiled at the assembled staff. "Quarterly results exceeded expectations," he began, his voice smooth and practiced. "We've maintained all major client relationships and increased revenue by 0.3%. It was all lies. Every number was inflated. Every success was exaggerated. Every statement was carefully crafted to hide the chaos beneath the surface." I pressed a button on my phone. The USB drive I'd left with IT remotely activated. The projector glitched. Derek paused, confused. Then the screen switched to audio playback. Derek's own voice filled the auditorium. not the polished, professional tone he used in meetings. This was his real voice. His voice in the hallway, joking about manipulating metrics. His voice in emails to coworkers, discussing how to bury evidence. His voice in private calls, discussing how to manage the narrative about previous employees. I watched the color drain from his face, watched the confusion on his coworkers' faces transform into horror and understanding, watched HR representatives at the back of the room exchanging urgent glances. Derek started to speak, but his voice cracked. He tried to unplug the projector, but before he could reach it, HR representatives stood up and moved toward him. Derek, Sharon said formally, we need everyone to stay after this meeting. This requires immediate investigation. The audio continued playing, recording after recording, proof after proof. By the time it ended, there wasn't a person in that room who didn't understand what had happened. Derek's career was over, and everyone knew it. HR took Derek to an office and kept him there for 4 hours. I watched from the hallway as he was escorted out at 6 p.m., carrying a box of his personal items. His hands were shaking, his eyes were red. In the days that followed, a dozen coworkers came forward with their own stories. People who'd been manipulated, people who'd been sabotaged, people who'd been traumatized by Derek's actions. The audit team expanded their investigation. Lawyers got involved. The financial irregularities turned out to be worse than anyone had realized, over $500,000 in overbilling and fraudulent charges. The company issued a public statement acknowledging mismanagement and committed to a complete overhaul of oversight procedures. Derek's name wasn't mentioned. Derek's punishment was personal and swift. Within a week, he'd been fired for cause, and his severance was eliminated due to the findings of misconduct. More importantly to me, my name was cleared. My performance review was amended. HR reached out with apologies and offers of better positions, but I was done with Morrison Tech. I submitted my resignation the morning after the presentation. A simple email, 2 sentences, no explanation. Derek had done enough explaining for both of us. HR tried to keep me. They offered me the position I'd originally been promised. They offered me even more than that, a substantial salary increase, a team of my own, guarantees of advancement. The VP of Operations personally called me to ask if I'd consider staying. I appreciate the offer, I told her, but I've accepted a position elsewhere. I'm going to pursue new opportunities. She understood, even if she didn't like it. My mind was already somewhere else. Derek showed up at my apartment 2 weeks later. I was surprised to see him, which shows how little I understood his desperation at that moment. He looked like he'd aged 10 years. His suit was wrinkled. His face was unshaven. His eyes were hollow. I need your help, he said when I opened the door. Please, I'm begging you. If you could just tell HR that you misunderstood the recordings, that you took them out of context, that this was all some kind of misunderstanding. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. Derek, you forged emails. You accessed my accounts without permission. You manipulated financial records. You sabotaged the careers of innocent people. You did all of that deliberately and repeatedly over years. He grabbed my arm. I made mistakes, but I don't deserve to have my entire life destroyed. You should have thought of that, I said calmly, pulling my arm away, before you forged my name, before you tried to bury me, before you threatened me in the break room. I pulled out the letter I'd prepared weeks earlier, my resignation from Morrison Tech, effective immediately. I'm done, I said. I'm moving on, and you need to face what you've done. I left him standing in the hallway and walked back inside. That was the last time I spoke to Derek. My first day at Pinnacle Digital was exactly what I needed. Lisa met me at the door with a huge smile. Welcome to the team. We are ready for that Hartwell financial presentation. The office was young and energetic. People actually seemed happy to work there. Nobody was looking over their shoulder. Nobody was afraid of their boss. It was a different world. Lisa walked me to my new office, bigger than I'd imagined, with windows overlooking the city. We have one agenda item for today's board meeting, she told me. We're going to pitch Hartwell Financial our services, and you're going to lead it. I spent the rest of that day reviewing my proposal one final time, making sure every detail was perfect, making sure every number was accurate, making sure every promise was one I could keep. Tomorrow I would do what Derek couldn't. I would earn success the right way. The Hartwell Financial presentation the next morning was incredible. I walked the client through Morrison Tech's failures with precise, documented evidence. I showed them the overbilling. I showed them the delayed projects. I showed them the mismanagement. And then I showed them what Pinnacle Digital would do differently. I wasn't just telling them we were better. I was showing them specifically how we were better. I was showing them that I understood their exact needs, because I'd spent 2 years watching someone fail to meet those needs. You've been overcharged by approximately $147,000 over the last 2 years, I told them. You've seen project delays that could have been prevented. You've experienced poor communication and lack of accountability. That ends today. That ends with us. The client representatives looked at each other. I could see it happening. The moment they decided to trust me. The moment they decided that Morrison Tech was history. Hartwell Financial signed the contract that afternoon. The amount was substantial, $500,000 over 3 years. It wasn't just a win for Pinnacle Digital. It was the perfect opening move. It proved to the market that Pinnacle Digital was capable. It proved that I could deliver. And it cut Morrison Tech's revenue by almost 20% in a single day. Lisa called an emergency meeting with the board. This is exactly what we hired Alex for, she announced. And this is only the beginning. We're going to expand systematically, and we're going to own this market within 18 months. Everyone in the room was looking at me, not with suspicion, not with doubt, but with respect, with recognition of what I'd accomplished. This was what success actually felt like. This was what I'd worked toward my entire career. That evening, I received a news alert on my phone. Morrison Tech had announced they were implementing a complete restructuring of their management team. 3 senior managers were being dismissed. An external audit firm was taking over their operations. The company's stock price had dropped 12%. All because I'd chosen to fight back. I stood in my new office 3 months later, looking down at the city from my window. The Hartwell Financial Partnership had led to 2 more major client transitions. Pinnacle Digital had grown from 15 employees to 40. I'd been promoted to VP of Client Relations. My salary had tripled. But those numbers didn't matter as much as something else. I didn't wake up anymore wondering if today would be the day someone betrayed me. I didn't spend my time looking over my shoulder. I didn't have to prove myself to people who'd already decided I wasn't worth believing. I'd reclaimed my life, not by getting revenge, but by building something better, by being better, by refusing to let Derek's actions define me. My phone buzzed, a news alert. Derek had accepted a settlement from Morrison Tech, admitting to financial misconduct in exchange for a confidentiality agreement. He would never work in technology again. His career was over. I didn't feel satisfied seeing that news. I didn't feel happy. I just felt like the last chapter of that story was finally written. I typed out one final email to myself, something I'd learned to do after everything that happened. They sabotaged my promotion, so I sabotaged their entire career. But the real victory isn't their loss. The real victory is building something that matters, building something that lasts, building something that nobody can ever take from me again. I closed my laptop and looked out at the city lights. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to prove that the best revenge isn't destruction. The best revenge is success.